Writer, director, producer, Todd Field. By everybody else was. I mean, the movie's made for people to come and see, so you don't make it in a vacuum. And you know, all of us, we're trying to make something that would allow many doors that anybody could choose to walk into and complete the film for themselves. So the film is unfinished until the audience arrives. So I don't. It's not like there's this moment where you say, "Oh, I'm satisfied. The film is over." I don't feel like I finished the film. Honestly, that was sort of the intent of the
For
film.
every film, or for this film in particular?
Well, definitely for this film. Yeah, I mean, this film is asking a lot of questions. And this film is a film about process, and it's a film about rehearsal, and it's not a film about result. So the idea that we would have any kind of equational narrative where there was right answers or wrong answers would be completely antithetical to why he did this in the first place.
But I must
Yeah,
say,
go ahead.
you were saying this is a conversation, right?
It is.
But it is, I think it is quite incredible that in the current landscape, when people are understandably nervous about putting challenging fare into the cinema, and it's a work that, I'm so pleased that you all got to see on the big screen, because the ideas are big, that you actually got to make the film you wanted to make, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I've no doubt. I mean, they were crazy to let us make this film.
Were or still are?
Perhaps.
Okay.
Again, it's unfinished.
So does that mean if you were to be out in the lobby incognito and hearing people debate or argue and having different takes on the film, that would be job well done?
Yeah, I mean, what we always talked about was as long as there's a lively conversation, and that conversation can be coming from very different angles, as long as someone's not indifferent to it,
Right.
then yes, and then mission accomplished. If somebody, somebody could have a read on the film that you've never seen, or you may not, perhaps not even agree with, but that's fantastically exciting.
So same question for Cate and Nina about finishing a movie, what you take away from it. Obviously, you are probably happy, or maybe you're not with your acting, maybe you're always wishing you could have done something different, but is that the same sort of thing that Todd's talking about having people uncertain about certain parts of the story, or is that not something you worry about?
Well, for me, I think I have to answer it in the same way as Todd, because it's still an ongoing process. I am still thinking about all these questions that are being asked in this film, because I'm not sure what my attitude is towards all of that, and that I'm being challenged by reading the script, working on it, and watching the film. I'm still in it. Myself, I watched it now 3 times, and every time I get something else out of it, and I find that pretty incredible. and that makes it an ongoing process for me as well. And as the one who does it and who watches it and who lived through it in a way. So yeah.
And are you the same way, Todd? If actors have questions, are you going to answer them, or are you going to be vague and say, "What do you think?" And what would your character do? How does that conversation play out?
Well, when you're making a film together, the 3 of us are filmmakers first and foremost. So the conversation is level. You'd be a fool to work with artists of this caliber and not beg them for their opinion. So that conversation evolves. You start a piece of, you start a script alone, and the worst thing that would happen is that whatever you thought was what you made. That would be a disaster, And so when Cate and I first started talking, there were a lot of the conversations started very practical, because there was such obvious amount of things that had to be done. Basically, Cate had to learn 25 years of musical knowledge and language and everything else in a year. And
English, had to learn how to speaking English.
That's a big thing for her, the English part. But when we were casting, after Cate, we talked about the first role we talked about was who's going to play Sharon Goodnow. We both said at the same time, Nina Haas. And the next thing was Cate said, "Do you think she'd do it?" And I said, "God, how would she do it?" Because we'd seen everything that Nina had done. We'd seen all of her work with Christian Petzold. Obviously she's an incredible stage actor. I had just seen her in this film at Ina Weisse called The Audition. I don't know if any of you have seen that film. Have any of you guys seen it? I highly recommend it. Where she plays this. She plays this. Violin teacher that has PTSD, and she's just extraordinary. Anyway, whatever. And so the first time I spoke to her, my hands were sweating, and I remember sitting in the kitchen and
it was creepy.
I try to keep them below frame, but not too much. And she said, "Yeah, I'll do it, but there's one little thing here I think you might want to do differently," that's a very Nina Haas sort of gentle piece of telling you that maybe you should pay more attention to something. And that conversation expanded. Nina and Cate were in Budapest, happened to be in Budapest working at the same time during the year period while we were waiting to make the film. So they had met, and that was really important. But the very first conversation that the three of us had blew open the script in a really good way, in an important way, which is getting down to the brass tacks, which is what is this thing? I forget about what these characters are. What is the thing? And the thing is an examination of power, and power is not a unidirectional phenomenon. It requires others. So how does power work? How do people benefit? What's the cost benefit of power? And all of that. But that really came out of the very first conversations that we had with Nina, and so that set the table. I mean, at that point, it was just like, there's an old saying, and I'll shut up. But I worked with this filmmaker a long time ago, and he said, when I'm writing a script, I always say, "God, that writer is so smart, so wonderful." And then I'm directing the movie, and I go, "Who the fuck wrote that script?" And then I'm editing, I'm saying, "That director was an idiot." And I think that's true for anybody that makes a film. So I was very, very lucky because Nina and Cate saved me.
But no, we would often defend the writer against your direction.
I know, you're really wrong-headed.
Because you were so wildly open with that, and I don't think that's always you as a filmmaker in a way trumped you as a screenwriter. It was a conversational gambit, and Todd was really insistent. You sort of said in a sort of a slightly anxious way, "We are going to need rehearsal," because oftentimes everyone's time poor, and you come in and you hit the ground running, but you knew that we all needed time to percolate all of the textures and subtexts and the history between the characters in order to make the thing breathe, so that we could dispense with lines, so that we could do something with a look. I mean, a look from Nina Haas is like it's everything.
Yours isn't too bad.
No, it's true. It's true, and because there's really only 4 points of view essentially in the film, but the main are really our only eyes and our ears and our heart in terms of us being able to witness Lydia Tarr is through this character played by Nina Haas, and so the economy of what this character has to do, with just like that, and the specificity is so important.
But you know what the
Nina Haas
interesting...
makes it look very easy.
But the thing is, that was the good thing, that I wasn't aware of that. You know, it's not that it was a conscious thing. I was just, I mean, I have her to look at, you know, and to watch and to see what she's doing with so that happens at the end when you see the film. I wasn't aware of it.
Well, you weren't aware of it, I think, when we were doing the stuff with the orchestra, because I remember we were doing like 95 camera setups in the first day, and
Yeah, it was fast.
it was really fast,
Yeah.
and I remember we put a couple of angles on Nina, and then we moved them out right away, and she said, "Can you come over here for a second? What were you doing? Because I don't know what you were doing." I said, "No, perfect, we got it." And she said, No. But that's the thing. You know, the thing is that you were always in it. You were completely in it. It wouldn't have mattered. It was totally irrelevant to let you know what was going on, because you were absolutely present. You were making decisions constantly. You know.
Todd, I'm going to ask you about.
You weren't prescriptive about it, but you kept sort of talking about the rehearsal process in the movie. And it's not a film about conducting, it's even not really a film about an orchestra or the classical music world, but you wanted it to feel like a fly on the wall. And there are characters who, and I suppose Lydia Tarr in particular, who's very hidden from herself. I remember when I was playing Blanche Dubois years ago, and I was talking to my husband about her drinking. And I said, you know, she drinks a lot. And I said, you know, she's obviously got an issue with alcohol. And he was saying about the different ways at different times of the day that an alcoholic might drink. And sometimes you can actually pour a drink in a way that you're not actually drinking. Do you know what I mean? And there's so many things that Lydia does where she's not even aware that she's doing it. And I think the tragic thing for me is that she comes to that painful realization that she's not, people perceive her differently to how she perceives herself. And I think that that's a very human thing. And you don't have to be in a position of authority to have had that experience where people confront you with something that you said that you really didn't intend it that way, or you had no idea that what you just said had the impact on that person that it did, or you don't even perceive that you've done something that you need to apologize for. And I think that is very human and recognizable, you know, I think, but that was embedded in the filmmaking, and the way I think that's what allows, hopefully, an audience to lean into the characters, to the story, is the way that Todd has shot, the way the camera sits in relation to Lydia and her actions.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know what, you know, I mean, that's, we know how she responds to this character who has become unsettled and ultimately commits suicide, but we don't know what occurred between them. And these are all consenting adults, right? There's some kind of transaction, as Sharon Goodnow says in the end, and this really came out of these conversations with Nina, you know, which is, these are transactional relationships, straight up, you know, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't work, and humans are imperfect, and you know, you have this character who's sitting at the top of this large power structure, this bureaucracy, and much of her life is attenuated to maintaining that bureaucracy that has very little to do with the child she was, who used music as an escape hatch to get out of her situation. So she's a completion junk. She just wants to get things done, you know? She just wants to, and maybe sometimes the tempo in which she conducts her life to get things done is not the tempo of other people.
Todd's filmmaking is incredible.
We went, okay, they live here? What does that say about them? And Todd did this brilliant thing with Marco, is there was this pivot point in the apartment, and they put this massively beautiful grand piano in the middle of it that to me looks like a coffin. And I think that was something, you know, that for people whose unifying force in their relationship has been music. It's tied every part of their emotional, physical, and psychological existence together. It's left them during the pandemic, of course, you know, and the pandemic's only tangentially referred to. And I think if you watch the film in 20 years' time, and I do think it'll stand the test of time because Todd's a master filmmaker, but it's not a big texture, but this is a very silent house.
But that was really your idea. I mean, we walked in there and you said there's something missing here. There should be a piano here. And I said, okay, well, let's get a Hamburg Steinway. It was like $250,000 piano. We had to get a crane to
I
bring
didn't
it in.
get paid, so that was...
No, we had to deal with Steinway. But the idea that Cate had, and it was so brilliant, which she said, this is a house about, with this power couple where they show off each other, where they present, where they entertain. And this piano has not been played because they haven't entertained. And so much so to where she's retreated into just playing a spinet in her office, right? Or to her original apartment that she had when she first moved to Berlin. But it's untouched, and it is like a coffin, and it was untouched. We never touched this thing the whole time we were shooting. There was an extraordinary instrument, and nobody played. You played it a little bit.
Oh my God, and that's the other thing about Nina. She's an incredible pianist. So Nina would just sit there between takes playing the piano.
You talked about power. I want to talk
It's
about
my role to tell an audience what to think, let alone try to educate them. And I don't really warm to any work of art that tries to educate me. I think it can provoke you to find out more about a certain period. I had quite a shocking experience actually really early on in my film career where I made a film about Queen Elizabeth with a very big and important Bollywood director, Shekhar Kapoor, who in the first days of shooting gave me a book with all the pages uncut saying the sayings of Queen Elizabeth I, saying, I'm not interested in history, that's your job. You know, and that when it came out, people were talking to me about somehow that it was historically accurate. Where it's like, no, this is a Hollywood hybrid movie, and so that somehow that you would make a film set in any period to somehow be accurate about events. I mean, that's what biographies are for. That's what history is for. And we look at certain events certainly that happen with many indigenous cultures. You know, I'm reading an amazing book at the moment written by two extraordinary writers, one of who passed away, called The True History of Everything. And you know, and it's flipping history on its head, and that history gets rewritten at various different points of contemporary history, and it depends which angle you look at it from as to what actually took place in those events. So I never think of cinema as an educative tool. It's provocative. It's entertaining. It's asking you to think and feel things outside your own experience, perhaps. And it's certainly not. I mean, I often bemoan how linear and literal cinema can often tend to be. When I think it is actually, when you think about Godard, it's such an elastic, potentially elastic medium.
I want to ask two last questions about your costume designer, Dina Degler, and what her wardrobes meant to you as actors. There's a great last shot of the orchestra, notwithstanding about your own wardrobe and what it meant to you, and how you found character through her work.
Yes, I've worked with Dina several times before, and I love working with her. And for me personally, I find the character starts to, particularly a character who is going to move a lot in various different ways. It's an important kind of foundational building block to have a sense of who the character is, particularly one who has built an identity and who is tragically concerned with legacy and her outward presentation. So, and then how there were very long screen days. So we then had to work out, well, how can we have her begin the day, but then all these events happen, how will the wardrobe then be deconstructed by the end of the day? So that was those conversations are practical, but through the practical conversation of working out what you're going to wear, you somehow move into the emotional and psychological state of the character, which I find the twinning of that kind of external visual sense of the character, marrying that with what's going on internally, a really foundational part of the process. I think I've discovered over the years, and doing that with Bina is, she's extraordinary.
Nina, do you want to add anything?
Well, only maybe I totally agree with what Kate says. That what was new to me with Bina, and I think that was also something special for this film, as far as I understood her, that she was very much dancing with us. So we had a few pieces in the trailer. So every morning, if we started a scene, she was like, "But where is?" And like, "Is Sharon now? What do you think she would pick now? So it was
a wardrobe.
Yeah, exactly. And that was beautiful because we could kind of explore these characters, and she would have the right piece for the next scene ready, but it was something we could explore, and that was beautiful.
She's also, aside from her like incredible skill as a designer, and tiny things like this, taking this character that's completely constructed and then just invisibly just something's off. And something's off. So by the end, you don't get caught. The way she tracked everything was amazing. But also just, she's a proper filmmaker. I mean, she's worked with Pedro Almodovar in a couple films. She was nominated for Academy Award for her work on Mulan, and contemporary costume design is completely underrated and very, very hard to do perfectly. And she, she's a filmmaker in her own right, and we would have a weekly dinner together, and she really had this kind of beautiful way of kind of invisibly going throughout all the departments and keeping everybody kind of focused on the same thing. And
She's very cohesive, collaborative force.
Incredible, yeah.
Before we thank our filmmakers, I want to thank you guys for coming out to